Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in beautiful Southern California, about to have a conversation with Dr. Robert Hollander about some very interesting movement in the philanthropy side of wine, actually. Wine Talks, of course, available on Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you hang out for your podcasting, and sponsored by the Original Wine of the Month Club, now sporting the Napa and Sonoma series of wines. Hey, have a listen for a conversation I had with Nia Ruth. She is a woman of color and obviously a woman who has just started an influencer business and a little club. She's actually a competitor of mine, but very interesting conversation. That is out now at all your favorite podcast hangouts. But not while we're here. Here to have a conversation with Dr. Robert Hollander about what he's doing in the wine world. We're going to talk about cancer. We're going to talk about prostate cancer. We're going to talk about all kinds of things that deal with that and wine. So welcome to the show, Doctor.
Well, thanks. It's nice to be here, and I'm comfortable with Bob if you are.
And Bob's fine. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
You were driving from. First of all, you live in Florida.
Yeah.
Full time.
Yeah.
And you went to Mammoth
To snowboard.
So, how do you get the Mammoth from Florida?
Well, there are a couple ways. It just depends on what Delta and United happen to be doing that day.
Because they got a small airport there, though they take some semi-large jets.
Yeah, and it's not helpful. I used to fly into LA on Delta and then United to Mammoth, but United has changed its schedule. They'll fly into Bishop. They'll fly into Bishop from San Francisco.
Oh boy, okay.
So depending on what the schedule is, I'll fly either into LA, San Francisco, or Reno, and fly or drive from somewhere.
They at some point, this is not the subject we're going to talk about, but I wanted to peel back a little bit. I forgot the name of the company that bought Mammoth many years ago, and they really had intentions of making it this major resort, destination of the world for skiers. And it's kind of interesting because it's a huge mountain.
Yeah, it's a great place.
And it's got a wonderful infrastructure, but it never really happened.
Yeah, and I know the name of the company, and it's just
it's eluding me right now.
Yeah.
Air West Air, West something anyway. So I have a family member that built 14. I don't know how this can happen, but it's all about timing. He built 14 really nice townhouses right off of that new development or newer development where the Bonaventure is and all that.
Yeah.
They had to give them back to the bank. They couldn't sell them.
Bad timing, I guess.
It was really bad timing.
Because the market is crazy there now.
I bet it is. Yeah. So did you get some skiing in on this, some snowboarding in this
I had
trip?
a great day yesterday.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because I saw some pictures of the snow. Looks amazing.
Yeah, the conditions now are perfect, and there's a storm coming in this afternoon. They'll get 4, 5, 6 more feet.
Well, we appreciate you coming down. Are you going to fly out of LAX?
Yeah, I have a flight tomorrow morning.
Oh, okay, good. So it's just not. I appreciate you coming in, but I didn't want to make sure it wasn't just for this. So you were diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2010. 10,000.
Yeah.
But you're a pulmonary. Define your latest.
Yeah, it's confusing.
Moniker.
So you want to know how I got to this point? I think that's where.
I guess that's a better way to put it.
Yeah. How did you get here?
Making more words out of than necessary. But you're a doctor by trade. You worked with the VA. But let's go through that process. You went to medical school.
Yeah. So the interest in wine. So for my last 3 years in medical school, I worked as a waiter bartender at a restaurant banquet facility in West Orange, New Jersey, and at a time where I was kind of on like subsistence budget for food and stuff. Working here was a bit of an eye opener, and I got exposed to fine food and wine. Not that we were supposed to be enjoying it as the staff, but it kind of happened.
Family meal and all.
Yeah, so I became interested. That was sort of the initial interest in food and wine. And then in 81, when I moved out to LA and Santa Monica to start my training in one of the UCLA affiliates, 2 of my co-interns were also interested in wine. And we started tasting and drinking together, and became interested in wine and food and wine, the pairing, cooking, started reading about it, started collecting. There wasn't much in the way of wine literature, back then. There was the Wine Spectator. And somewhere I read an article about 2 newsletters that were just starting up. One of them was Finnegan's Private Guide to Wine, and the other was the Wine Advocate. And I picked up subscriptions to both. Ended up sticking with the Wine Advocate. And
that's interesting. That's really interesting. The history of the periodicals of wine are, that's the Spectator, for instance, was just sort of a pamphlet newsletter, before Schenken bought it and turned it into what it is today. There was competing. In fact, this patch here is from 1975. It's the Les Amis de Vin, which was a group my father headed up in the South Bay. And that magazine, which was called the Wine of Les Amis de Vin, was an amazing periodical, actually. I've been trying to find past issues on eBay. Got 20 so far. Professional, particularly for the 70s, professionally done. But you're right, there wasn't a lot. The wine world was a little, I'm not going to say exclusive, but it was a little less approachable than it is today for the average consumer. You had to do what you did. You had to sort of seek it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. Yeah, now you can find information
anywhere.
Yeah, you Google it. And
in fact, what I'm finding when I do these podcasts with influencers, wine influencers, let's say 30,000 followers on Instagram, they're just not. I don't mean regular. Regular, not in a derogatory term. They're just folks that love wine, that want to learn about wine, and it seems to me now, after doing a few of these, that the influencer who's the regular guy that's talking about their experience with wine is becoming a very popular and followed thing, because they get a regular layman's conversation about it, right? And so back when you were doing this, it's just interesting that you got associated with it, and being in New Jersey, which wasn't necessarily known as the food capital of the world, but it was a fine restaurant.
Yeah.
And they had a great wine list.
And it was very intriguing to look at, to see these the French chateaus, the Bordeaux, the prices. There was one of the small banquet rooms, was actually known as the wine cellar, and the one wall was racks of wine behind wrought iron fence. It was very appealing.
It was appealing, like, well, I think maybe I want to learn about this stuff. Why would they put it behind why is it so important they put it behind an iron gate or build rooms around it? I think that's part of the intimidation of the wine world to the average consumer. It just feels like it needs to be more sophisticated than it really is to enjoy a good glass of wine. And so it's because you came to the West Coast and you went to UCLA that you think that you found friends that were interested in this, like us West Coast guys.
Yeah, I would say that definitely got it started.
Yeah.
The way we started, tasting and drinking together. We formed a little wine tasting group within the residency program. So half my residency was at the VA in Sepulveda, the Sepulveda VA.
The big facility right off of the 405, I think, right?
So Sepulveda's in the valley.
Oh, that side.
Yeah.
Okay.
We pretentiously called ourselves the Sepulveda Enology Society.
Oh.
And on a medical records orders page, I would write up the announcement for each of our meetings, make copies, and stick it in people's mailboxes. But the idea was to get together each month and to try different varietals. So it was open to anybody anybody in the residency program and their guests. The only condition is you had to bring a bottle of whatever wine it was we were tasting.
Wow.
And
you did that by varietal, by vintage, by whatever?
By varietal.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. Chardonnay the first month. I think we did Cabernets the third month and made it a potluck.
That's really fun. And this is 81, you're saying?
82.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's early on. When you think about the Judgment of Paris being 1975 and California wine, my dad's shop was still, my shop was thriving up until like 86, actually. That there was that kind of interest at that level. Particularly, you're young at that point, right?
26,
20s?
27.
Yeah, that's pretty unusual, particularly at the time of, I think, because California wine still hadn't, had footing, but it hadn't really caught on. The whole episode with the Judgment of Paris took many years for it to proliferate into the consumer, the regular consumer, not the aficionado. So, what were you studying at the time? Was this where you were doing your specialty when you were doing pulmonary?
This was during my internal medicine residency.
Right. And so you did internal medicine, and then you after that you went to the pulmonary side.
Did my pulmonary training at the West LA VA. That was the large VA you were thinking about.
And then after that?
Stayed on there as the internal medicine residency director and as one of the pulmonary critical care attendings.
Wow. And then Florida?
Yeah, in 95, West Palm, and then Gainesville in 03. But within the VA system the entire time. The
reason I knew of West Palm Beach being the center of the PGA world, besides the fact one of the courses they own is there, I had won the right to be the PGA wine club. I don't know, maybe it was 10 years ago. They put an RFP out, they put a bid out, and I went out to West Palm Beach, and I made a presentation in front of all the head honchos, and I ended up winning. And through a bizarre accident, it never happened because the guy that organized it got hit by a tree.
That is bizarre.
On a golf course. And so, and the PGA inside itself couldn't handle doing this club, but there was some synergy, obviously between golf and wine at the time. In fact, there were 16 golfers during that period that had their own wines. It's back down, I think, to Greg Norman now, being the last survivor, and he's coming on the show in January with his daughter Morgan. But there were, I think it was Faldo and Duffy Waldorf were supposedly the clubhouse wine guy, and Fred Couples had a wine, $60 Sangiovese. I mean, and celebrity wines. That's what they are, right? Yeah. So no one's going to spend $60 on a Sangiovese when they can buy, at that time, they can buy Jordan Cabernet for $40. It's just, why would you do that, right? So that's what happened to it. In fact, I was invited to Pinehurst for their big wine weekend and give a presentation on the 16 wines of the golfers. And so Annika Sorenstam and all these people, and it was it was pretty fun, but whatever.
Could have been awkward.
Yeah, it was a little. I don't know about you, but have you ever been to Pinehurst? You ever played there?
No.
Apparently there's a whole section of rooms which are for the guys like me, like you're going to go on the golfer's weekend, so the room is about this big and it's completely unappointed with anything of any consequence. It's like a desk and a table lamp, and that's pretty much the whole room, because obviously you're going to go play one of their 18 courses or 17 courses they have there. And then there's another set of rooms which is for like events and people that are there for a reason. So it's pretty funny. Anyway, so tell us about your diagnosis, your prostate cancer, how this came about, and then how your foundation got started.
All right. So leading up to that, I'd started winemaking.
Okay. That part I didn't know.
Yeah. So I think anybody who becomes interested in wine and makes their way to Napa kind of romanticizes about the possibility of, well, wouldn't it be cool to do that? But then, the rational part of your brain theoretically kicks in and says, no, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, theoretically, but.
And then in, I guess in 2007, I probably read it in Food and Wine. It was about the opportunity to do small volume custom crush. There was a facility in Napa that offered that.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, all right, well, that's cool. I'll make a barrel. No, I'll make 2 barrels. I'll make a barrel of Zin, and I'll do a Syrah-based blend.
Mm-hmm.
So it got the winemaking got started as an indulgent hobby. I had access to Zinn grapes from Grist Vineyards through this facility, and I had had Turley Zinn from Grist. And I thought, well, if Turley can do this with Grist, maybe I can too.
Nothing but the best.
Yeah. So that was how that got started. And the problem with that is that all of a sudden you've got 300 bottles of wine.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, I mean, how much of this can I realistically drink? And I had some half-baked notions about trying to market it, but as you well know, and I've heard some of your guests talk about, is the need to scale, price points, distribution, and these were things I really hadn't considered up until that point, and I quickly realized that, this isn't going to be that easy. So, and then this ran up against the whole cancer thing. So what happened there was, without going into all the gory...
Let me stop the thought for a second, because I want to peel that back a little bit more, because the business of wine is really hard.
Yeah.
And here you are with 2 barrels worth, 300 bottles, and I've had this conversation with many people that went to the Custom Crush in those days, and after to try and dabble in this idea, but the idea of making money, once you look at it under a microscope, you don't even need a microscope, right? Binoculars will work. The margins suck. The competition is huge. You're up against monolith companies that are going to buy their shelf space. It's a whole different environment once you get to that point. But you had 300 cases of 300 bottles of some nice things, right?
Yeah, 25 cases, and I even at a wine tasting event where I was pouring wine to benefit the local UF radio station and NPR affiliate. I had an encounter with a local restaurateur who tasted my Zinfandel from that year and had his sommelier come talk with me about having it in their restaurant.
Well,
which is pretty cool.
That's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I tell you about that?
No, I'd love to hear it. Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So you've been to these food tasting events where you got tables and tables of people from wineries pouring their wine, and you pay a reasonable entry fee, and you can go and...
How'd you find out about that in the first place? To be there?
Geez, how did I get started with that?
Friend of a friend. Somebody said, "Hey, you got to pour at this event. You're pretty proud of this thing."
Yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that.
Yeah,
how
okay.
I even,
So
came to.
But you're there.
But I'm there, and just people are walking by with their glasses, and they put their glasses in front of you, and you pour your wine, and you tell them a little bit about it, and they take the glass and walk away. And anyway, this one particular moment, I'm standing there just kind of surveying the crowd and watching people, and I see this serious-looking man in a business attire, come walking by, and he walks up to me and puts his glass out, and he looks pretty bored by the whole event. And I poured him the 2008 Zinpiphany, the 2008 Zin, which was a great wine.
Wow.
I was really, really pleased with that. Anyway, he took the glass and walked away, took a few steps, raised it to his nose, and he stopped in his tracks. And
you're watching.
I'm watching him,
Yeah.
because he's totally bored. He's like kind of doing all this out of habit.
Who knows? Yeah.
It's like, why am I here? I'm not going to find anything. Because for him, it was probably like a trade event to come to this.
That's what happens.
Anyway, he stopped and he sniffed it, took a sip, and then he waved over somebody, and this young man who turned out to be his sommelier came over. And they both tried it, and they came over, and they spoke with me about having it in their restaurant, which I was only too excited about.
Yeah, wow.
But that's where you run into the economics of it, just like you were talking about, my price point. And and this was pre-foundation, where I had half-baked notions about maybe making a little money on it. It became clear that it just wasn't going to happen.
I mean, I think it's all relative, because the last time I did that, crushed grapes, actually crushed grapes, and I have a license to make wine. It's in Santa Rosa. It's a alternating proprietorship, and I had $22 into this Mendocino Merlot, just landed here. Now, regular retail margins are going to put it at $35, and who's going to buy my what was called a human condition Merlot for $35? Like, again, when you can buy a well-known brand for probably $20, right? And so, do you remember how much you had into a bottle back in 1981 or whatever year it was?
About $20.
Yeah. So back then is even, that's a huge number on a wholesale basis. And let's just, for the listeners, we would walk through this, and correct me if I'm wrong. You're going to do it for $20. You got to make a margin.
Yeah.
Let's say the average margin for a wholesaler is 25%. So you got to put $5 on top of that, to $7.50 actually. And so now you're at $29 wholesale. Restaurateur now brings it in, let's say $30. And back then, I don't know what the price is on a thing, but they're going to double it for sure.
Right.
Double the retail. So here's this unknown brand for $60 on the list that they know when they can go through and see a Mondavi or something else, the consumer's going to know what to buy. So is that what?
Yeah, that
that's
was
basically
exactly it. Yeah.
And you got to ship it to them, right?
Yeah, right. Shipping on top of that from a warehouse in Northern California to South Florida. And then Florida has this mandatory 3-level distribution system. So
they did at the time.
Yeah, so what I realized that I needed was that if it was going to work, I was going to have to do direct to consumer. And I really never went anywhere with that until the whole Cancer Foundation thing kind of fell into existence.
Well, Florida's actually loosened lately, so it's much better than it was even 5 years ago. But the three-tier process, which was part of the prohibition, which in my opinion, prohibition was never repealed. It was just broken up into 50 different versions of it, is what created that. So you can't run your own rum is basically what it came down to, right? So you've been making it ever since.
2007 was my first year. I haven't done it every year. It stopped during the pandemic, and depending on my inventory, and I haven't always made. So it's somewhere I developed my crowdfunding model.
Yes.
Right. So. So I have to kind of talk about the cancer and
yeah. Please do. Whatever you're comfortable.
Yeah. So the cancer thing came up. I was finally diagnosed after there were a couple of opportunities to diagnose it earlier, but it didn't happen. So when I was diagnosed in 2010, and I realized that mistakes had been made, I contacted the university's risk management office, and how did that conversation go? Hi, my name's Bob Hollander. I was recently diagnosed with prostate cancer, but there was an opportunity to diagnose it a couple years earlier. Did the university want to offer me a settlement before I brought a lawsuit? And the person on the other end said, "Excuse me, wait, what?" And I repeated myself, and they took my contact information. They said, well, we'll call you back. So about 2 months later, I got a call back from the risk management office. They wanted to meet with me. And they were very apologetic. The case was reviewed, and everybody felt really bad, and they offered the most that the state was allowed to offer under the state's sovereign immunity laws. In the grand scheme of things, it wasn't that much.
Mm-hmm.
The cancer was diagnosed at an incurable stage. And So
This is
the
2010.
yeah. So I actually initially walked away from it when they presented the money. I was like,
You're like, that's not enough.
I
I'm
was like,
leaving.
really? Really? I said, I have no civilized response to that. And I got up and I walked out. And after
Wow.
talking with an attorney and considering, likely courses of action, and at the time thinking about trying to do, something meaningful. I mean, what can I do to make sense out of all this? And then being involved with the winemaking, it was like all this kind of came together. And I was like, all right, I know what I'll do. I'll start this foundation. I'll endow it with the settlement. I'll use the money to fund prostate cancer research and do the same thing with my wine, that the winemaking would be used as a vehicle to fund the foundation. So that was kind of how it all came together. It was...
and when was that you started the foundation?
Yeah, 2011.
Well, so soon after the diagnosis.
Yeah, that's,
So you took the settlement.
Yeah.
And then you turned it into the foundation.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't happy with taking the settlement thing, but it made the most sense at the time. And then the foundation, just kind of put a little positive spin on the whole thing.
Make things happen a little bit. So the foundation now, it sells why I have a problem with Zimpiphany.
Zimpiphany. It's like if you had a Zin and it was epiphanitic because it was so amazing.
Well, and it's got, you keep getting awards, particularly from the San Francisco International Wine Competition, which is rather well respected throughout the industry of wine. You also have another brand called #2Red.
Number 2 Red.
Number 2 Red. And I figured it wasn't a hashtag, but that's what I said.
It looks like it.
Yeah. Which is a Rhone style wine. And looks like they're around about $50 a bottle. And this goes through the foundation and the cancer research. Where does that end up?
Yeah. So the way I like to think of that is you don't buy the wine. You support the foundation and you get the wine as a gift. Kind of like, when NPR has its annual drive and you donate money and they send you a tote bag.
Yeah, right. I prefer the wine.
That's it. I don't give you a tote bag. I give you your choice of a couple great wine options.
So this is rather long tenured. This is many vintages. The same vineyard. You have a contract?
No, I've the grape sources have changed. The Syrah grape, for example, started in Santa Barbara County, White Hawk Vineyard, and is now. The Syrah grapes are coming from Hyde Vineyards.
Do they support the foundation as well? The vineyards and the farmers. You just buy regular.
Yeah. So this is where the crowdfunding comes in. So for the first, let's see, 7. So for the first 5 years of my winemaking, I like to refer to it as an indulgent hobby. And with the crowdfunding model, which I do on Indiegogo, it's kind of like Kickstarter, Indiegogo. I use Indiegogo because they permit the use of wine they permit alcohol. What people do is they back the campaign. They receive, I'll have perks, awards, anywhere from a single bottle up to 12 cases, wine for a year, or a custom case where I promise them 12 bottles of the best of what I have in my collection.
Is that ongoing? Or is it a time frame for this?
It is ongoing because my campaign was successful, and Indiegogo allows me to keep it alive.
Okay.
So
if somebody wanted to get on that, it'd be Indiegogo.
Yeah, and if they,
and what would they put in a search? Hollander,
2 Red, or Zimpiphany.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
Zin. Okay, ZINPIFPH.
PH, like the word
PH.
epiphany.
So I'm looking right at it. Zinpiphany. Zinpiphany, and or the number sign, the numeral 2, and red. The
Pound sign
red.
2. Yeah, hashtag 2 red.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I mean, you've got quite a few vintages here, and that, in the world of wine, it's all about experience, right? That's we can as winemakers, we can screw it up. We can take a good grape and make bad wine out of it, and what the reason that you don't is because you got some experience doing this. And this is rather fascinating, the accolades you've gotten, and looks like the last vintage for the Zinpiphany is 2017, is that the current vintage?
Yeah, most recent. I'm personally not drinking it. I'm still working my way through. I think the 2012s through 15s.
You still got this backlog.
I'm drinking it as fast as I can.
Is that good for is there a conflict with alcohol in general with cancer treatments and things like that?
Geez, the official party line would probably be to not. So me personally, I'm not currently under therapy, so a glass or two that I have with dinner is not an issue.
Yeah, but if you're a cardiologist, you'd say, yeah, we think it's a pretty good idea, right?
I would say the world would be a better place if everybody had
right.
one glass, maybe two. But the literature on it seems to be changing periodically.
My granddaughter, my 3-year-old granddaughter, was just diagnosed with kidney cancer, and Willem's
tumor. Yeah.
And so they took it out about a month ago, and she's going through chemo now. And so we've got a whole view of that. That up until now, we see the commercials on TV for Shriners Hospital or Children's Hospital of LA or whatever, and you just say, "Oh, those poor kids." And then now we see it. She's lost her hair, and she's actually in the hospital today because her white blood count was down. And you realize what a struggle it is, and how hard it is. But here you are, 12 years after your diagnosis.
Yeah, I'm actually, to be honest, I'm kind of surprised I'm here.
Oh, really? We're glad you're here.
Yeah, pleasantly surprised.
And you look healthy. It looks like you're working out,
and I was snowboarding yesterday, 54 miles an hour, my top speed yesterday downhill.
Whoa. I won't do that on my road bike when I know what's underneath me. That's amazing.
Yeah, I'll send you the YouTube clip.
That's phenomenal. Because I tried to snowboard. I wouldn't ski at 54 miles an hour, but snowboarding would be really dangerous for me.
So the thing I would tell you about snowboarding is it's not something you try. You got to do it enough so you can actually do it.
Yeah.
Because until you get to the point where you can stand on the board, make a couple turns, and stop, it's really uncomfortable. There's a lot of falling involved.
I was a surfer. I still skateboard regularly. And I thought, this is going to be, it's just a controlled slide. I mean, what it comes down to it, right? So,
there's some balance. Balance, and in a way it becomes like riding a bike. It's like once you do it, it's effortless.
Once you get locked in, you pick it up again.
Yeah.
Well, I go down to Strand in Hermosa Beach on my skateboard, and the guy with the gray hair, and people, I get all kinds of looks all the time, and I'm glad to do it because I think guys of our generation that are active should stay active and reap the benefits of that. Though I will say I did take a spill not too long ago, and it took a little while for my thumb to come back into use.
Yeah.
But so the Hollander Foundation, if you wanted to participate as a consumer and get some Zinpiphany and some hashtag
the number 2 red.
You can
do it through the Indiegogo page, or the foundation page is a point of light.
.us.
Yeah. And so the thing is, because it operates as the foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit, you're really donating to the foundation, so it's tax deductible.
Oh, wow. Well, sure. I love the packaging. It's great.
You like the label?
Yeah.
Can I tell you how I did that?
Yeah, please do.
So my first 2 years, I used a photographic label. I took couple pictures that I had shot in the California Sierra, up around Mammoth, and I made labels out of them. And I think they're really pretty, but they're also kind of busy. And I wanted something that you could see and pick out from a distance, and that was really distinctive. So I took a bottle of wine, went to the bathtub, and had my wife hold the bottle so it was spilling. And I took a picture of it. So the picture of the spilling bottle.
It's fascinating because it looks like a drawing, but it really is probably just a rendering of that.
And then I loaded it.
Spilling, yeah.
I loaded it into Photoshop and played around with it, and that's what I ended up with.
Well, for the listeners, this is fascinating because label art, I guess you want to call it, the label design. You have to submit this to the federal government, and then they send back corrections if you say something wrong, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They don't really care what it looks like unless there's naked women or something. But generally, the design's not important; it's what it says. But you said something very, very important that maybe you don't even know. And the book is out here somewhere, which is about the Barefoot Sellers story, which is the biggest brand in America. A guy named Mike Hollander started it. Came into my office in 1989, and I thought that was the stupidest thing I've ever heard. The Chateau Lafite, F-E-E-T, of California.
Yeah.
Right? And he was a hustler. The guy's a energetic guy. And I literally told my dad on the way when he left, I go, what a stupid idea. And then he becomes the largest brand in America. But he was told when he was given this wine as a payment on a debt, I forgot how many thousands of gallons, and it was not in the wine business. And he went to Thrifty. Remember Thrifty drugstore?
Yeah, of course.
And so they had wine there, and he went to the buyer and he says, hey, I've got this wine. The guy goes, don't bring it back here unless I can see that label from 4 feet away when I'm walking down the aisle. That's how he designed the label. That's why, I guess from an imagery standpoint, it's not unlike yours. You've got this nice bottle of wine, which is very simply and strategically placed, and you can see it. You can tell what it is when you're walking away from it. And he has that foot, right? So he took it back to the guy. He goes, here, I've got it. He goes, the guy goes, I didn't say I was going to buy it. I just told you to design it. And so they never carried the wine. But that's fascinating. That's a fascinating approach. Would you just knew already that that's what you needed to do. It's really, really cool.
I at the same time, I also have to mention the wine label designer with the facility I was working with. Mm-hmm. Her name is Jenny Dahl, and she has designed probably more labels than anybody anywhere.
Was that Bin to Bottle, or which facility was it?
Right now, it's the Wine Foundry.
Oh, the Wine Foundry.
Yeah. But she worked with me on the label. But the photographic thing, the pouring wine bottle, that was started in the bathtub and finished up in Photoshop.
That may be like a Snoop Dogg Cali Red label where you got a picture of you with a hoodie on or something. So what happens to the money? So we buy this bottle of a case of this for 6 bottles for $275. 100% of the proceeds, 75 or 90% of the proceeds go to a particular cancer research?
Yeah, so everything goes to the foundation. So I've to this point I've kept the foundation operating costs at zero.
Wow.
Kind of paying them out of pocket myself. And the foundation makes an annual gift. Any nonprofit, any 501c3 has to disperse 5% of its assets each year.
Mm-hmm.
So we make a gift, and what I've done is I look for a young researcher involved in just cutting edge research, prostate cancer research, related to either the advances in therapy or the mutational genetic drivers. Cancer starts from a mutation, and if you can identify the mutation, then you can also start to look at therapies that target what the mutation is doing.
Let me ask you a question about that. It's pretty interesting. I'm 64, so these are concerns, obviously, of my generation as well. My brother just had a prostatectomy, and he's in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking to myself, I wonder if the technologies regionally in America vary. You hear commercials on the radio about the Invita, which is some cancer institute in Arizona that touts targeted therapies, et cetera, et cetera. Is there geographical differences in treatment?
Yeah, so that applies to pretty much
Anything?
just about anything in medicine. There's individual expertise, there's institutional expertise, and maybe in some regions there's regional expertise, like in a place like in urban centers where there's a strong university base, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Houston, Manhattan. You're going to find centers of excellence.
In universities, my dad was a pharmacist by trade, but always said go to the university hospitals. Theoretically,
Yeah,
then in your situation, seems like there's a misdiagnosis there. But
yeah.
are they not the leading technologies in research generally, or
They are. I just happened to pick the wrong urologist.
because I thought, wow, it seems like a radical thing. Are prostatectomies pretty much still a radical procedure for?
So there's a lot of it depends there. If this was your brother, so if he had surgery, he was probably diagnosed at a curable stage and underwent probably robotic assisted microscopic surgery, which is one very successful approach. But there's also some evidence that radiation may be just as effective at an early stage. The thing is, robotic surgery or robotic assisted surgery versus radiation, they have different array of side effects.
Yeah, I mean, he's either a year into it already. It's still complicated.
But in terms of longevity, I think they're both similar. It's just what you start digging around in that. It's a very sensitive part of the body.
Of course.
But
I know every time I go to the doctor.
Yeah.
Well, I have. Well, it's not my diagnosis or anything like that. So if my listeners want to buy the wine, they go to a pointoflight.us, and you can participate in purchasing some Zimpifany and some number 2 red, and you can help support the Hollander Foundation, which supports the research of prostate cancer therapies as well as genetics, I suppose. And it's a fascinating thing, and I'm glad you're using. It's cool to know that wine, the business of wine, can help in this part of the world of charity and medicine, because wine is a cultural thing. You already said it already, how the value of a good glass of wine, what it can do to your soul and to your demeanor and your outlook on things. And here you're using it to support research on a very serious disease, to help find solutions.
It is the number 2 cancer killer in men, and affects 1 out of 7 men over the course of a lifetime. So somebody has probably been affected by it.
No, I've already lost an uncle to it. And my brother, I said, obviously, problem with my uncle was he was a hospital pharmacist. He was there every day and didn't deal with it. Okay, I've already got you here longer than I promised you, but I have to ask you this question, because this is a book I was showing you earlier called "The Wine is the Best Medicine." This was written in 1974 by a French MD. He was also a homeopathic MD, so he sort of worked both sides of that. And it's a book of maladies, human maladies. And not only does it have sort of the malady and the French wine that could help symptomatically. Now, and it's also in a curative way. I will say there are a couple of things where he says, I'm not sure why it helps, but you feel better anyway. So
Right.
That's good. So I'm going to give you a malady, and I'm going to give you 3 French wines that might help that. And much like the Master of Wine test or a Master Somm test, sometimes the answer is not as important as why you said that. And so sometimes you get credit on those tests for justifying why you thought this was a Cabernet from Chile, even though
Right.
the answer might be wrong.
So for showing my work.
Right, exactly. Showing your work. You know what that's about. So if we had bronchitis, we'll go into the pulmonary side of things.
Okay.
You could have a Grave of Bordeaux, you could have a young Beaujolais, or you could have a Burgundy.
Oh, I'd go for
Red
the Beaujolais.
You go for Beaujolais. Unfortunately, the Beaujolais is for diarrhea. So we missed that part of the body. The bronchitis would be the Burgundy. And let's see what it says here. Now, maybe you get the dosage right. There's a dosage associated with each one of these maladies. For bronchitis, you need to drink how much?
60 ml.
60 ml would be...
That's it, 2 ounces.
Yeah. It's actually 3 glasses a
Okay.
day. And that would be, I guess it depends on how big the glass is, right? So here, Burgundy for bronchitis. Okay, bronchi. Diseases of the bronchi. Under this heading, we mean all the acute diseases that affect the respiratory apparatus. These maladies, especially the last 2, can be accompanied by lassitude, cardiac weakness, and kidney malfunction. Therefore, as well as the classic therapy prescribed by the physician, we recommend the use of well-chosen wine, Burgundy. Why? Because they're rich in phosphorus, the properties of which we listed at the beginning of this work. But they want you to warm it up to 140 degrees.
Wow. I like my reds at a comfortably warm room temperature, but
140.
that's up there.
But is the phosphorus argument valid, you think, at that point?
Never heard of it before.
I never, after all this,
Never
not
heard
even
of
the
it.
VA or anything. Huh?
No.
Well, it always provides some fun, and actually all the French winemakers that come in here, they take a picture of this book because they had no idea it existed, and I found it in the archives of my father's library. So it's been a pleasure having you here in a fascinating conversation and enlightening conversation. We appreciate you stopping in on your way back from Mammoth on the way to Costco. So,
Actually, that was my wife. She had something to return.
yeah, well, there's one nearby, but very, very fascinating. I hope we can stay in touch and see what you're doing on a regular basis, and make sure that I'm going to continue to promote this foundation so that somebody wants a good glass of Zin, that they can help with the research for prostate cancer as well.
That would be amazing. Thank you
great.
very much. I'm excited to have
Cheers.
been here. Thanks.
Thanks for coming. Cheers.